Did the United States engage in secret talks with its arch-nemesis Iran? Was the US seeking Iran's help in stopping the Red Sea attacks? An explosive report by the Financial Times reveals that Washington tried to hold talks with Tehran earlier this year. The report suggests that the US was trying to persuade Iran to use its influence over the Yemeni Houthis to halt the attacks on ships in the Red Sea. And if true, this would further indicate the failure of Operation Guardian Prosperity. It would signify an admission that the US-led naval task force, which was aimed at stopping the Houthi attacks, failed in preventing the disruption of international shipping. Now, here's what the report states. The indirect negotiations, during which the US also raised concerns about Iran's expanding nuclear program, reportedly took place in Oman in January. The US delegation was led by the White House's West Asia advisor, Brett McGurk, and its Iran envoy, Abram Peli. The Iranian side, meanwhile, was represented by Deputy Foreign Minister Ali Bagheri Kani, who is also Tehran's top nuclear negotiator. And I said indirect negotiations because they were mediated by Omani officials. Omani officials reportedly shuttled between the Iranian and American representatives, so they did not really speak directly. According to the report, a round of talks scheduled for February was delayed as McGurk redirected his focus on efforts to secure a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas, as well as secure a hostage release deal. The talks underline how the Biden administration is using diplomatic channels with its enemy, even as it uses military deterrence, all in a bid to de-escalate a wave of regional hostilities that would involve Iran-backed militant groups. Now, according to the report, US officials see an indirect channel with Iran as a way of talking about the full range of threats that the US says emanate from Iran. And this includes, as per the report, the US conveying to Iran what it needs to do in order to prevent a wider conflict. Remember, Iran itself has said that it is not looking for war. The last known talks between the US and Iran were the so-called proximity talks last May. And then as well, by the way, the Biden administration had quietly restarted talks with Iran in a bid to win the release of American prisoners held by Tehran and curb the country's growing nuclear program. Since Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel triggered the war, Iran-backed Lebanese militant movement Hezbollah has traded daily cross-border fire with Israel. Pro-Iran Iraqi militias have launched scores of missiles and drones against American forces in Iraq and Syria. And the Yemen-based Houthis have attacked dozens of ships. They say they are acting in solidarity with the Palestinians who have come under Israeli assault in Gaza. Their Red Sea attacks have disrupted global shipping, forcing shipping firms to reroute and undertake a much longer and more expensive journey. US officials have repeatedly accused Tehran of supplying Houthis with weapons and intelligence to conduct these attacks. But you see, Tehran has denied being involved in Houthi attacks, while Iran has acknowledged its political support for the Houthis, going so far as justifying their attacks as support for Palestinians. It insists that the Yemen-based group acts independently. US officials reportedly know that military action alone will not be enough to deter the Houthis. Washington reportedly believes that ultimately Iran will need to pressure the Houthis into stopping the activities. You see, the relationship between the Houthis and Iran has reportedly deepened, with the Yemeni group becoming an increasingly important member of Iran's so-called axis of resistance. Naturally, Western powers led by the US are worried. As I mentioned, they are already concerned about Iran's nuclear program. They say Tehran has continued to enrich uranium at levels close to weapons grade. In fact, before the Gaza war started, Iran's nuclear program was the focus of the Biden administration. Washington was trying to contain a crisis triggered by former President Donald Trump's unilateral withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal that Iran had signed with world powers. And then in September last year, Tehran and Washington agreed to a prisoner swap. After that, Washington also unfroze $6 billion of Iran's oil money, which had been stuck in South Korea. The funds were transferred to an account in Qatar, where the use would be better monitored. And alongside that deal, the US was also seeking to agree unwritten de-escalation measures with Tehran, including a cap on its uranium enrichment. But all that changed when the Gaza war broke out. Not only did the war dash all hopes of progress in ties, Iran has also not been able to access the $6 billion transferred to Qatar. To be sure, the US did not freeze the funds, but the process of identifying which foreign companies are clear to trade humanitarian goods with Iran using that money has stalled. And naturally, Iran is frustrated. Already, it is facing mounting economic pressures as it stands isolated due to sanctions by the West. So as the situation stands today, the revelation that US held talks with Iran gained significance after the report of their secret talks came out. Iran's state news agency quoted an informed source as saying that the discussions were limited to the lifting of American sanctions on Iran. But what was really discussed between the Americans and the Iranians? I guess we'll never know. Meanwhile, Iran's Minister of Defense, Mohammad Reza Ashtiani, was quoted as saying, Iran has increased arms exports 4 to 5 times in the past 2 years. Ashtiani said, and I'm quoting, certainly in the future, these exports will increase even more considering the innovations being made and the new armaments we are pursuing and unveiling. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.